In July of 1996, a 31-year-old Canadian man named Blair Adams embarked on a journey that made no sense to anyone who knew him. He was healthy, successful, and close with his family. Then, suddenly, he began telling friends he was in danger, that someone was trying to kill him. What followed was a week of erratic travel, strange decisions, and one of the most baffling unsolved murders in North America. On July 5th, Blair withdrew all the money from his bank accounts, thousands in cash, along with gold and jewelry. He packed them into a small bag and drove from his home in Surrey, British Columbia, to the U.S. border. When officials noticed his unusual behavior, they stopped him, suspecting he might be involved in drug trafficking. He turned back, only to try again the next day, this time flying to Seattle, renting a car, and driving thousands of miles east, seemingly at random. Along the way, Blair stopped in several cities, acting increasingly paranoid. He told people he was being followed, that someone wanted him dead, but he never said who. Hotel staff described him as polite but agitated. He checked into one room in Knoxville, Tennessee, then immediately checked out again, claiming he didn't feel safe. Just hours later, his body was found half naked in a construction lot near a hotel, his money and valuables scattered around him. At first glance, robbery seemed likely, but nothing had been taken. Investigators were left with contradictions, signs of struggle but no clear motive, witnesses who described him as terrified but unable to explain why. There were no drugs or alcohol in his system. The case was as if fear itself had driven him into a trap. Detectives traced his final hours through security footage and eyewitness accounts. Blair had been seen at a gas station the night before, buying fuel and talking to an attendant who said he appeared disoriented. He had asked for directions to a hotel that was just across the road. Why he ended up in a nearby construction site remains unexplained. The scattered money, his missing keys, and the absence of any suspects left police with nothing but questions. Some investigators believe Blair suffered a sudden mental break brought on by stress or illness. Others insist someone was indeed following him, and that whoever was caught up to him in Knoxville. Nearly 30 years later, Blair Adams's death is still one of the strangest mysteries in the U.S. South. A man who seemed to know something terrible was coming, racing across borders and time zones to escape it, but finding it waiting for him anyway. The field where he was found has long since been developed, but his story still haunts travelers who pass through Knoxville. Blair Adams ran from something unseen, and whatever it was, it never had to show its face. Viewer discretion advised. This case is based on true events. On the morning of September 7th, 2012, 19-year-old Faith Hedgepeth was found dead inside her off-campus apartment in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. She was a promising university student, smart, kind, and driven, studying biology and dreaming of becoming a doctor. Faith was part of the Haliwa-Saponi Native American tribe and had earned her place at the University of North Carolina through dedication and hope. Her future seemed limitless. That morning, Faith's roommate returned home and found her lying near her bed. The scene was quiet but unsettling. A broken bottle, blood on the walls, and a handwritten note left nearby. The message was short and cryptic. Police sealed the apartment and began collecting evidence that would puzzle investigators for nearly a decade. Detectives quickly ruled out robbery. Nothing of value was missing. Friends said Faith had been out at a local club the night before and came home around 3 a.m. Cameras showed her leaving the club with her roommate, both appearing relaxed. By morning, Faith was gone. Over the following years, the case remained one of North Carolina's most haunting mysteries. DNA was recovered, but no match appeared in national databases. Hundreds of people were questioned, including friends, classmates, and a few ex-boyfriends. Each lead faded into silence. The note, written in hurried, uneven letters, only deepened the mystery. Some believed it was staged to confuse investigators. Faith's family never gave up. They spoke publicly year after year, reminding the world that she was more than a headline. She was a daughter, a friend, and a light to her community. Then, in 2021, after 9 long years, new technology identified a suspect through a distant DNA match, a man named Miguel Enrique Salguero Olivares, who had once lived nearby. He was arrested and charged with Faith's murder. For the first time, her family could breathe again, though the questions still lingered. Why her? What really happened that night? The case moved slowly through the courts, with evidence still being reviewed. Faith's parents called it justice finally walking toward the truth. Today, at the University of North Carolina, a scholarship in her name supports young Native American women who dream of medicine, carrying her legacy forward. The apartment complex has new tenants, new paint, and new lives, but some memories don't fade. Faith Hedgepeth's story remains a reminder that persistence, even through heartbreak, can still lead to light. Please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Viewer discretion advised. This case is based on true events. On the morning of February 14th, 2013, South Africa woke to news that would shock the world. Riva Steenkamp, a 29-year-old model, law graduate, and advocate for women's rights, had been shot inside her boyfriend's home in Pretoria. Her partner was Oscar Pistorius, the celebrated Paralympic sprinter known as the Blade Runner. Within hours, police confirmed he had pulled the trigger. That night had begun quietly. Neighbors later reported hearing voices, then screams, and finally gunshots. Inside the house, Riva was found in the bathroom behind a locked door. Pistorius told police he believed she was an intruder. He said he had fired through the door in fear, thinking she was a burglar. The explanation divided the nation. Riva Steenkamp was more than the headlines that followed. She had studied law, worked as a TV presenter, and campaigned against gender-based violence. Friends described her as radiant and thoughtful, someone who wanted to make South Africa safer for women. Her death sparked national debate about fear, fame, and the boundaries of justice. The trial that followed captivated the world. Television cameras broadcast every moment, the tears, the testimonies, and the reconstruction of that Valentine's Day morning. Prosecutors argued that it was no accident, that anger and control had driven the shots. The defense maintained it was a tragic mistake by a man who lived in constant fear of crime. After months of testimony, the court found Pistorius guilty of culpable homicide, the equivalent of manslaughter, but the verdict was later overturned, upgraded to murder, and his sentence extended to more than a decade behind bars. Through it all, Riva's parents sat quietly in court, listening, waiting. They spoke of their daughter's kindness and courage, choosing to focus on her life rather than the violence that ended it. Each year, they continue her advocacy work, reminding the world that her story should stand for hope, not horror. Today, Riva's image still appears in campaigns supporting women's safety across South Africa. The house where she lost her life has been sold and renovated, but its walls once echoed with a tragedy that changed a country. Riva Steenkamp's legacy endures, not as a victim, but as a voice for others who cannot speak. Please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Viewer discretion advised. This case is based on true events. On the night of September 21st, 2012, 29-year-old Jill Mayer left a bar in Brunswick, a suburb of Melbourne, after an evening out with colleagues. It was just after 1 a.m. when she began the short walk home, a journey of less than 1 kilometer. She never made it dot by morning. Her husband Tom reported her missing. What followed would become one of Australia's most heartbreaking and transformative murder cases. Jill was well known in the community. She worked for a BC radio, loved her job, and was described by friends as vibrant, funny, and compassionate. When she disappeared, thousands of people volunteered to help search for her, hoping she had simply gotten lost or gone to stay with a friend. But CCTV footage from Sydney Road told another story. The grainy recording showed Jill walking alone, smiling briefly at a man who stopped to speak to her. That man was later identified as Adrian Ernest Bailey, a 41-year-old with a history of violent offenses. The footage showed them talking for less than a minute before they disappeared from view. Within days, Bailey was arrested and led police to the site where he had buried Jill's body in bushland outside Melbourne. The country was shaken. The idea that such a random act could claim the life of a young woman walking home sparked national anger and grief. Candlelight vigils lit up the streets of Brunswick, and more than 30,000 people marched in silence to demand change. Jill's death became a turning point in how Australians discuss safety, sentencing, and violence against women. In 2013, Bailey was convicted of rape and murder and sentenced to life in prison. Jill's husband, Tom, spoke publicly about love, loss, and the importance of remembering who she was, not just how she died. He described her as the kindest person he'd ever known, and someone who made everyone around her feel seen. The bar where Jill spent her last night now bears a small plaque in her memory. The street she walked is lined with murals painted in her honor, each one glowing with color, not sorrow. Her story still resonates across Australia, a symbol of the change that came from tragedy. Jill Marr's legacy is one of light. Because of her, countless voices have joined the call for safety, compassion, and reform. Please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Viewer discretion advised. This case is based on true events. On July 28, 1986, 25-year-old Suzy Lamplugh left her West London real estate office for a routine appointment. She noted it carefully in her diary, 12:45, Mr. Kipper, 37 Sherwood Road. It was an ordinary day, bright and warm. She locked her car, smiled to a colleague, and stepped out into the city. She was never seen again. When Suzy failed to return to the office that afternoon, co-workers began calling her mobile and local hospitals. By evening, police were involved. Her white Ford Fiesta was discovered later that night, parked miles away in Fulham. The keys were missing. Her purse and business cards were still inside. There was no sign of struggle, no fingerprints, no witnesses, just the mysterious name, Mr. Kipper, a clue that would haunt investigators for decades. The disappearance gripped Britain. Posters filled train stations, and news anchors repeated her description each night. Hundreds joined the search. Her parents, Diana and Paul Lamplugh, appeared on television pleading for information. Despite thousands of tips, the trail grew cold. Years later, attention turned to a convicted murderer named John Cannon. He had been released from prison shortly before Suzy vanished and was known to use aliases when contacting women. Witnesses claimed a man resembling him had been seen near Sherwood Road that day. Though he denied involvement, detectives considered him the prime suspect. In 2002, police formally announced they believed Cannon was responsible, but no charges were filed. Without a body, the evidence was still circumstantial. Suzy Lamplugh was officially declared dead in 1994, presumed murdered. Her parents transformed their grief into purpose, creating the Suzy Lamplugh Trust, a national charity promoting personal safety and supporting victims of stalking. Through their work, her name became a symbol of awareness and prevention rather than tragedy. To this day, Suzy's remains have never been found. Every few years, new searches are launched across London and the Midlands, but the mystery endures, a meeting with a client who may never have existed, a young woman lost to time, and a question that still whispers through Britain's true crime history. Who is Mr. Kipper? Please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Viewer discretion advised. This case is based on true events. In the summer of 1980, 20-year-old Dorothy Stratten was one of Hollywood's brightest rising stars. Born in Canada, she had been discovered as a teenager while working at a Dairy Queen in Vancouver. Within a few years, she was a model, actress, and Playboy Playmate of the Year, admired for her beauty, but also for her quiet intelligence and kindness. Everyone who met her said she was different, but behind the fame was a man who couldn't let go. Paul Snyder, her husband, and the one who had first introduced her to the modeling world, watched her career take off as his own life began to crumble. By 1980, Dorothy had separated from him and begun a new relationship with film director Peter Bogdanovich. She was building a career in acting and preparing to move forward with her life. Friends later said she was excited, nervous, and hopeful, unaware of how much danger she was still in. On August 14th, Dorothy went to meet Snyder at the home they had once shared in Los Angeles. She planned to discuss financial matters and end things on civil terms. When she didn't return, friends grew worried. That evening, police were called to the house. Inside, they discovered both Dorothy and Paul Snyder dead. It was a crime that stunned Hollywood. The news spread fast. Headlines called it The Beauty in the Darkness. But those who knew Dorothy focused on her kindness, her gentle nature, and her love for her younger siblings, whom she had helped support. In interviews, Hugh Hefner described her death as the most devastating event in Playboy's history. Filmmakers and actors across Los Angeles spoke of how bright her future had been. The tragedy became a symbol of obsession, control, and the dangers faced by young women in the entertainment industry. Peter Bogdanovich later wrote a book about her titled The Killing of the Unicorn, not as gossip, but as a plea for empathy, to remember Dorothy as a person, not a headline. Today, her story remains one of Hollywood's most heartbreaking cautionary tales. A woman who rose from small-town beginnings to international fame, only to have her life cut short by someone who refused to let her go. Dorothy Stratten's name lives on in film history and in the lessons Her story left behind, that success and vulnerability often walk side by side, and that even in glittering cities, true danger can come from the ones who say they love you most. Please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Viewer discretion advised. This case is based on true events. On a winter night in June 1995, 24-year-old model Carolyn Byrne was found at the base of the Gap, a cliff overlooking the ocean in Watson's Bay, Sydney. It was a place known both for its beauty and its tragedy. Police at first believed it was suicide, another loss in a place where too many had jumped before. But as days passed, questions began to surface. Something about the scene didn't add up. Carolyn was young, successful, and well-liked. Friends said she was bright and ambitious, but also under pressure. Her boyfriend, Gordon Wood, worked as a driver for businessman Rene Rifkin, a name that often appeared in Sydney's finance pages. The night she died, Wood told police she had been depressed. Yet others described her as cheerful that day, preparing for upcoming modeling work. Her family refused to believe she had taken her own life. When investigators examined the position of her body, they began to doubt the original assumption. Caroline's remains were found far from the edge, a distance that suggested she had been thrown, not fallen. There were no witnesses and no camera footage. The case remained open for more than a decade as police quietly re-examined the evidence. In 2008, Gordon Wood was charged with her murder. Prosecutors argued that he had thrown Caroline from the cliff during an argument, using his strength and knowledge of the area to stage it as a suicide. The trial captivated Australia. Expert witnesses recreated the fall, measuring trajectories, wind speed, and terrain. It was one of the most complex forensic cases ever presented in a New South Wales courtroom. Wood was convicted in 2008 and sentenced to 17 years in prison. But 3 years later, in 2012, his conviction was overturned on appeal due to doubts about the scientific evidence. He walked free, maintaining his innocence. For Caroline's family, the outcome offered no closure. Her father, Tony Byrne, continued to fight for answers, saying his daughter's case represented how justice can sometimes slip away in the gaps between evidence and truth. He worked to ensure that her story would not be forgotten. Today, visitors still stand at the lookout over Watson's Bay, unaware of the history below. The sea continues to crash against the cliffs, calm one moment, violent the next, a reflection of the storm that has surrounded this case for nearly 3 decades. Carolyn Byrne's story remains one of Australia's most haunting mysteries, a question of love, loss, and the thin line between tragedy and intent. Please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow.
If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Every view, like, and comment helps these stories reach more people and keeps the memory of those still missing or unsolved alive. If you'd like to help the channel grow, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Tell me where in the world you're listening from and which story stayed with you most. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, the truth is often stranger than we think. This is Chapman Crime.